It's time to take your seat in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Here's your host, Mike Vaccaro.
Thank you, Chuck, and welcome everybody. Mike Vaccaro here in the front row. Glad to have you with us once again alongside J.R. Quitman, our creator, producer, and director. Up to episode number 5, and for that, we're going back to basketball and bracketology. We've got Joe Lunardi on with us. Never too early to talk brackets. With March Madness closer than you might think, the basketball season right around the corner. We talk about him growing up in Philadelphia, influences in the basketball world, and how it came to be, bracketology, what it is right now, and all the coaches that are very interested in what Joe Lunardi has to say. Plus, we'll talk about his book and a bobblehead as well. All that, episode 5, with ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi. Well, Joe, we appreciate you joining us here today in the front row, and it's the start of basketball season right around the corner, so it's about to be your busy time, and we decided to get you right before that. But again, thanks so much for joining us here today in the front row.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. I saw on Twitter this morning, 25 days until the first tip on November 9th and the Champions Classic and about 120 other games. And I think back to where we were a year ago this time, not even certain that there would be a college basketball season, much less knowing how it would happen. I think what we did experience was, under the circumstances of the pandemic, remarkable and remarkably high level play. But it sure will feel good to walk into the gym again.
Yeah, it certainly will. And I know that was something that a lot of us were missing. I had to do some broadcasts from my office last year as well. So hopefully that won't be the case this year. But before we get to what's going on now, let's go back to you and your origin story here and how this all happened, because it's certainly unique, the personality that you've become and this role that you've really created, I think, in this country when it comes to college basketball. But you're a Philadelphia guy, grew up in Philadelphia. How much were sports part of your life? And I'm assuming that basketball was maybe the biggest sport in your life.
Yeah, there's a picture of me. I haven't been able to find it in the last 20, 30 years, but I do remember a black and white picture of me as a first grader sitting in front of my dad's manual typewriter. Now, I realize we probably have viewers who don't know what a typewriter is, but it, like picture your computer keyboard, but actually like little metal rods that put the letter on a piece of paper. Anyhow, I'm at the manual typewriter and I was typing, according to him, box scores of the 76ers. Because the first team that I remember following was in the first grade, and it was the 66-67 Philadelphia 76ers. And, they were pretty good. They had a guy named Wilt Chamberlain, and he was okay. And he was from Philly, and he went to Overbrook High School. And I grew up in the Overbrook section of Philadelphia, and I was, 6, 7 years old. So I just assumed that everybody had a player from, their neck of the woods who was going on and doing things like Wilt Chamberlain. So that was the team I picked to follow. And for Christmas, I remember asking for a clock radio, believe it or not, with a sleeper switch so that I could have the Sixers games on the radio at night as, I was going to bed. And in the first grade, that probably meant I got to the end of the first quarter, but whatever. That's where it started.
That's awesome. That's Wilt Chamberlain. You're going back there. So was that post 100-point game for Wilt Chamberlain during those days?
Yeah, that happened in 62.
Yeah.
And I was 2 years old, and, allegedly 140,000 people have claimed to have been in Hershey that night. I do not claim that. I was crawling. And that would have been about 80 miles. So
there you go. Well,
I do think, though, that this is maybe off topic, but I think there have been 3 athletes, like, because I'm kind of a numbers person, who just dwarfed and revolutionized their sport just when you look at the numbers. Wilt, Babe Ruth, and Wayne Gretzky. And when you look at, like Wilt averaged 50 points a game one year and over 48 minutes. And he never fouled out of a game, ever. You think there were guys beating on him? And, Gretzky, he's the leading goal scorer of all time. But if you take away all his goals, he's still the leading scorer of all time. And, Babe Ruth, is now an adjective. Like, his accomplishments are Ruthian. Like, we don't say someone's accomplishments are Lunardian, right? And for good reason.
Well, those that get the brackets as accurate as you do, maybe they are Lunardian. So you never know. You could be within that realm at some point. So again, you're from Philadelphia. You go to St. Joe's Prep and then to St. Joe's. Were you playing basketball at that time? How close to the sport were you growing up?
Well, I was playing basketball if you count the Nerf hoop in the basement. And the backboard on the front of the garage outside with my big brothers. No one would have ever called me, a significant athlete of any kind. But I guess the clearest way of having it start. So I did go to 9th grade in Philly at St. Joe's Prep, but for 3 years, 10th, 11th, and 12th, my dad's job was on the West Coast. So we moved to Southern California, and I went to a school called Damien High School, and it was an all-boys college prep Catholic school, and we were good at the major sports, football, baseball, basketball, and eventually the coaches, football and basketball particularly, I became like, and this will shock people, I became like the clipboard guy, right? The guy who stood next to I recorded, all right, we ran left off tackle. And at halftime, I'd say, coach, we ran that play 4 times and we got 7 yards or whatever. So I became like an SID of sorts for the high school. And my other big high school activity was forensics, speech and debate. So here I am doing numbers and kind of learning how to make arguments. And if you think about it, I haven't progressed at all. Now I'm just doing it on different topics and with a camera in front of me. But I suppose, they say water finds its level, right? So maybe I found mine in the 11th grade and have stayed there ever since, but eventually came back to Philly for college, to St. Joe's. And that's really, the Philly college basketball scene, the Big Five. For people who don't know, at that time, the 5 Division I schools, Villanova, Temple, St. Joe's, Penn, LaSalle, all played at the same building, the Palestra on Penn's campus, and typically in double headers. So, we were having teams come in from all over the country from multiple leagues all season long. Like, imagine if you could drive 15 or 20 minutes from your house and in one night see a Big East team, then those days, Villanova, Notre Dame, an independent, Temple, now American, and St. Joe's playing, or whomever, right? Like, I saw Carolina at the Palestra. I saw Duke at the Palestra. I saw Boeheim at the Palestra. Patrick Ewing at the Palestra. So, like, without knowing it, I majored in college basketball. Like, my actual degree, I think I still have an incomplete from junior year and going to the Elite Eight. But my actual degree wasn't, and for most of us this is the case, right? Wasn't as impactful as the activity of being a student journalist, kind of growing up in and around the Palestra and sitting on press row for titans of the media when print journalists were kind of king of the world. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be one of those guys. And in a way did become one of those guys, because for 10 or 12 years after college, I did cover the Big Five for one of the suburban dailies in Delaware County, where I live, and covered the great John Chaney teams and Lionel Simmons at LaSalle, of course, Villanova in '85, which, given their more recent titles, probably feels like ancient history to a lot of people. The St. Joe's run with Jameer Nelson, etc. All of those teams, and in any given year, at least one, if not more than one, were national, programs and had runs in the tournament. So that's how I kind of fell in love with the tournament, and ultimately how it was put together, because I was just trying to gain insight to cover the team or teams in a given year that were on my beat and that were going to have a chance to make noise in March. And I started studying how they put the tournament together. Not because there was any long range goal of bracketology or what it has become. Like people are, well, you must have had a business plan and this and that. Do I look that smart? Like, no. You just do what's next as best you can. And sometimes it leads to something.
I mean, you go Wilt Chamberlain, as you said, to the Big Five. It's easy to fall in love with the sport when that's the case. And the
For
Palestra
sure.
as well. I've been in the Palestra. I haven't had the pleasure of broadcasting in the Palestra, but I know there's an aura about that building. And it's maybe more because of the teams that had played in there and the coaches as well. I mean, like you mentioned, it's got to be such an influence to have those guys, a Raleigh Massimino, a Don Chaney, or John Chaney, guys like that, so influential in the sport. And you're around them on almost, I'm sure, a weekly basis. That had to be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be weekly media lunches, right? And the coaches would they would mostly sit around and bust on each other, because this was when, in a time when winning what we called the City Series, the local Big Five championship, like if you ask guys from the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, what happened in 73, right? They'll talk about the Big Five champion more than the NCAA tournament. Like, it wasn't the Colossus at all that it is today. And now, I think, like I remember going to those media lunches, and there's Rowley, and there's Chaney, and before that, Chuck Daly, Jack Ramsey, and before that, Harry Litwack and Jack, like these aren't just, like, these guys are in the Hall of Fame, right? Like, they're founders and builders of the game. And there I am, 19, 20-year-old little reporter with a notebook. And, just my era of being an undergrad, like Jimmy Lynam coached St. Joe's. Well, he coached and general managed a bunch of NBA teams. Paul Westhead coached at LaSalle. He won an NCAA or NBA championship. And then later coached, the Loyola Marymount teams. So it was really an outrageous incubator of basketball. And, if I don't get in the Palestra now at least once a season to just kind of like walk down the tunnel, like people, talk about walking down the tunnel at Notre Dame, play like a champion. Like, my whole goal was to be able to walk down that tunnel at the Palestra and eventually get tall enough to hit my head on like the concrete thing where everybody had to duck. Well, I'm still not ducking. But every player that's gone down to that floor has ducked. And it really is a museum. The concourse, there's a display for all the Big Five teams, all the great high school players, Kobe dunking on people, and, Rasheed Wallace. It's just, there's nothing like it. And, I remember, it's 35 plus years ago, like, I wanted to get married there. Seriously. And, I was outvoted 1-1. which began, someone's undefeated record, which still stands as I wave goodbye for the day.
Well, that just means you're coachable. That's the key. Maybe that's something
exactly
else that
right. Yeah, let me look at my last performance review here. Takes direction well.
There you go. Well, again, what an incredible place to start and get that education. So from there, I guess you stayed in Philadelphia. You were at Temple as a sports information director for a while. Is that kind of the
I was at
once you
Temple.
graduated?
Now, right after college, like I always had a full-time job, which didn't have anything to do with basketball. And we used to call them stringers in those days, who would be out covering, like I was like a full-time, part-time writer for one of the suburban dailies. I would go cover high school football games in the fall and, whatever, do local columns on kids from our area who had gone on to great things at their various schools and activities or what Olympic sports and all that. And, just would be a great way to tell stories and get to know a lot of people and a lot of things. Like I did a story once on a national putt-putt tournament at like the local course. And I think back and thought, man, that needed a bracket, right? But I didn't know that then. So yeah, St. Joe's as an admissions counselor, Temple in human resources, and then back to St. Joe's as basically the PR director for the university, never sports info on the academic side. And the basketball was, always, like an evening and weekends thing, except for maybe a couple of Thursdays and Fridays in March. I think I'm coming down with something. And, and, before the work from home thing, now you don't even have to lie, right? Takes all the fun out of it. But that led to getting lined up in the late 80s to do some off-season writing for one of the preseason publications, in this case, the Blue Ribbon Yearbook, which is the thick bot for the insiders in college basketball. You know what I'm talking about. I got one around here somewhere because this year, and of course now it's digital. When I started, Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet, but the big thick. But and I covered the Ivy League for a couple summers, and I think the Atlantic 10 once. And the guy who founded it, Chris Wallace, was working out of West Virginia, where he was from, and eventually he brought me on as an editor and managing editor, and then he went on. He's now a general manager in the NBA. So apparently, you don't need a lot of qualifications for that gig. I'm still waiting for the call, but it was doing Blue Ribbon in the 90s and then eventually being the editor of Blue Ribbon for, I don't even remember, 6 or 7 years after Chris left. We added, if there was any true inventing in my story, it was this. We added a postseason guide in 1995, which was an 80-page soup to nuts preview of all 64 teams in the tournament. And if you think about it, again, pre-internet or early internet, like we had to go to print selection Sunday night, like actual like ink, paper, binding, shipping, right? No, like hit send. And we had to go to print on Sunday night in order to ship on Monday and Tuesday, so folks would have it Wednesday for that, 12:08 Thursday first tip, right? And if you think back, how would you approach a project like that? You would have to at least have some idea of who's going to be in the tournament and in what configuration, so that when the bracket came out, you weren't starting from scratch.
Wow.
So that was when the first bracket, estimates or guesstimates were done, like 94, 95, 96. So I tried to learn about how they did it. And I would, in traveling around either as a writer, and by then I was doing some St. Joe's games on the radio. My current partner, Matt Martucci, your friend, he hadn't been born yet, I don't think. But I was, I'm old, so I was doing them. And in just the course of being on the road during the season, sometimes you'd run into committee members or past committee members or just people who knew stuff. So, I credit those kind of pioneers of Selection Sunday for talking to me. Like, they didn't have to talk to this little guy from Philly with the little book who, was spending his whole selection weekend with 5 guys in his office typing up copy. But they were kind enough to do that. I think it was seen as a credible, query and exercise. And ESPN.com was getting its start around that time. And we thought that maybe if we gave them my bracket projections in like February, maybe they would put our 800 number to order the book. Again, listen, not a link. There was no e-commerce. Like, hey, dial 1-800, get Diane in our office in West Virginia, and she'll put you on the mailing list for Selection Monday. So the projection started, about 14 clicks into ESPN's first website, and it just went nuts, Mike. People were nuts because there was nothing like it. Like, let's say you're an, I don't know, Iowa fan, right? Well, yeah, you think you're in the tournament because you're, I don't know, 18-7 on February 20th, right? But you don't, like, when the bracket came out, it was a complete mystery. There was no, understanding of the who, the how, the why, the where, anything. So we kind of became inadvertently in a window into that, but not for the reason of being a window. We were just trying to do a book. We were just trying to get a book out and get it to the printer on time.
And it was, like you said, you tried to get ahead of the curve so that you could print it in time. So, I mean, necessity kind of created the invention of this and this
Correct.
kind of industry.
Correct. So when people say, well, how did this all start? I'll say laziness. We wanted to finish as quickly as we could. And frankly, in the first 2 or 3 years of that postseason book, because I wasn't very good at it, narrowing down the field. Like, we might assign 80 or 90 stories around the country on all the teams. And then we had to pay for that. So we were paying for a couple dozen a year that we weren't printing. So, like, we're operating on a shoestring at that time, right? Like, I always joke, man, I was a great businessman. I invented this postseason book. And in its first year, we did $250,000 in sales. Fantastic. We had like $240,000 in expenses. So, like, great. But not for me, not for our partners. So we had if we were taking a business class, we'd say, well, perhaps if we shrink, the expense side, we can have a better bottom line divided by the depreciation of the barometric pressure of North Carolina, and we'll make $20,000 instead of 10 divided by 12 people or whatever it was at the time. But, long story, a little less long. I did get pretty good at it. And eventually ESPN.com evolved and started promoting it some. And the projection business for me became more, what's the word? Yeah, more kind of profitable, if you will, than Blue Ribbon. So, I sold out of Blue Ribbon. Our kids were coming along at that time, so there were only so many quote unquote side jobs that I could, manage at one time. And that lasted for a few years. In 2002, ESPN News was born as a channel. They were looking for, I guess, geeky nerd stat types to be, because their top analysts were on the big channel, right? And somebody put me on in 2002. I guess I didn't completely F up. And, now 20 years later, there's a studio in my house. Who knew?
So that's the bracket bunker is in your house. Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, but I'm not going to say, I'm not going to say which house or exactly where, because, it is an undisclosed location. Those Kentucky fans have a way of showing up on your lawn. Like if I were to tweet right now while we're talking that I move them down a seed line, by the end of the episode, I would be taken away in shackles.
The fan base is to be careful with. We're going to get more into that in a little bit, but and I guess again, when you were putting that printed version out, you had mentioned, or I had seen, Jim Nantz was using it. He's the voice of March Madness. Was that when you kind of realized, okay, maybe we're onto something here, and this could turn into something more?
Yeah, if there were a couple of aha moments, 95 or 96 when the first tournament guide came out, I'm at home on that first weekend watching games, right, with the sniffles. And now you'd have to go get a test. But I look at and we knew CBS had a one-person research department. ESPN was still doing some early round games. They had a research department, and they were our biggest customers, at least bulk customers for all their talent. They would buy, and I look up and there's Nance at the desk and there's my book. It's right there. And I'm thinking, wow, we should there has to be a way to make this a thing, right? And I remember at that 95 Final Four was in Seattle, and I went to the Final Four and I ran into Nance and I thanked him. And he said, I had it with me in my bag every round. Because there wasn't, again, no internet. There was nothing like it. So that's 95. In 2002, someone at ESPN.com decided to give Bracketology its own page, like a primitive version of what you just scrolled through. And yeah, there you go. Only then it had my picture, so that was a bad idea. But, the first night it debuted, that first Monday in January, whenever the college bowl games were over, it would be mid-January Monday night. In the first, I don't know, hour and a half, they got 250,000 views. And we looked at each other in the newsroom and went, holy camole, because I thought, yeah, it has it has an audience, clearly, but does it have, now we would say, can you monetize the audience, right? But was it enough to be a thing? Yes, apparently. And that was kind of when Bracketology came out of the, cult status, if you will, and into more of the mainstream and vocabulary of the season, right? Like when people say, oh, well, people pay attention to you and the committee pays attention to you. I have no idea. What I do know is the vocabulary and the understanding of the process has changed. If I show you the emails I got 20 years ago versus now, you'd realize how far along as a fan base we have become in understanding all of this. In those days, it was, why can't Villanova play Georgetown in Landover? Right? Today, the question might be, how do you distinguish 22-8 Clemson versus 21-9 Indiana when they didn't meet each other in the ACC Big Ten Challenge? Right? Like, it's just a whole different conversation. And I do think that bracketology's had a whole lot to do with that. Now, it would have happened, it would have happened. Like, it's not like if I wasn't born, we'd still be in the dark ages, right? Like, it would have happened. I was just first, not necessarily best, just first. And I don't take that lightly. I understand that I work in the kind of life's toy department now, and that's to be cherished, right? Like, we could have real jobs, and I did for a long time over on, that side. Of the last couple of years, I've been fortunate to be, semi-retired from my administrator jobs and just primarily doing basketball. And yeah, I'm even more thankful for all of this. But recognizing that in the grand scheme of things, especially after the last year and a half, that bracketology is not really very important in its bubble, if you will. It's incredibly important to people's jobs and careers, and for the players' professional aspirations, et cetera, et cetera. So, like, I don't ever wing it, because I know that at least until that Sunday at 6:00, people are counting on me. And, like, there are others who are just as good, if not better, at the analytical part. More power to them. But our network happens to be the regular season kind of first stop, if you will. And so people are paying attention, and I know that. And if I make a mistake, I know that very quickly. So I try to take the work seriously without taking me or really the subject seriously, because I know, like, again, nobody died because of that check swing call at midnight last night in the Dodger Giants game, right? But that doesn't mean a lot of people aren't feeling it this morning.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, they're fans, they're fanatics, and it's
Correct.
a big part of all sports, but certainly college athletics, especially when you throw in, this is my alma mater, this is where I went to school, and that's a big factor in people's desire to see what you're talking about them, for sure.
It's bragging rights. I mean, like, sports is essentially bragging rights, because we're all living vicariously through our fandom. And you're right, fan is short for fanatic. And I try to, like, when people say, "Oh, how do you put up with all those people on Twitter or whatever it is?" Well, without them, I'd be selling life insurance. So I just kind of try and take it as part of the deal and have fun with it. Every once in a while, somebody will get under my skin. Like, I'm human. But by and large, I've met the greatest people in my life through basketball.
Yeah, you can certainly tell that. Obviously, like I said, you're the first bracketology. Who coined that? Who came up with that? Because obviously that has kind of helped, make this what it is. It had to be something. How did it become bracketology?
Well, when we did our book last year, we did kind of try to dive into that some, and we discovered that I was quoted in a notes column in the Philadelphia Inquirer. I think it was 98. The beat writer was asking about Temple's chances. I don't. There you go. I know that guy. And I the writer said, according to Joe Lunardi, who calls himself a bracketologist. Right now, I don't remember ever calling myself a bracketologist, like on my own, but that got in the paper the next day, which spawned Bracketology, and that then went, on the top of the page of ESPN.com in the early 2000s, and here we are. So, it's become legally a term that is in the public domain. It's actually in the dictionary now. So I can't own it. It's not like one of those 3P terms that I can make money off of, because it's for everyone. So I hope it's contributed to the common good. Or as Rick Pitino once said in a post-game when asked about his team chances, you have to ask Lunardi what our seed is, but how would you like to have to fit bracketologist on a tombstone? Right? So I'm thinking, okay, well, that's still better than looks ugly in white suits on a tombstone. But whatever. He's been a fan and a supporter. And Mark Twain always said, I don't care what they say about me, just spell my name right.
So you've got the fan bases and you got coaches as well. So when you're putting these out, weekly, daily, as you get closer to March, are you hearing from any coaches during that time and questioning why you have, somebody from their conference in over them or whatever the case might be?
About every 45 minutes at peak time, right? Like this percolates along at kind of a manageable pace, I would say, until the day after the Super Bowl, whenever that is. Let's say, Monday, February 5th, right? Whatever that day is, then the whole sports world wakes up and goes, ooh, what's going on in college basketball? Like, it's what's next. And that is when, I start showing up on your screen every night, and they start putting the stuff on the crawl right at the bottom of the screen. And media call, coaches call, conference people call, my golf partner's friend's brother-in-law who went to Rutgers, and they haven't been since 97. Are they really going to make it? Should I buy tickets for Tampa or where, all that kind of stuff. So it's, it's part travel agent, it's part data analyst, part Dr. Phil. I won't mention any names. One February, I got a call from a, pretty prominent coach now out of that spot, but an ACC coach. I get this, Joe, call me by 4:00. I need to talk to you by 4:00. I'm thinking somebody died. I was still in my old job. I was a VP at St. Joe's. By that point, I was in a meeting with the president of the school, my boss. And I said, Dr. Jones, I'm sorry, this sounds urgent. And he knew it. So I call the coach back and I'm like, what's the matter? He's like, well, we've practiced before. I need to know what to tell the guys. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I need to tell them what we need to do to get in. And I said, you're 12 and 15. What do you mean? Like tell them to defend the ball screen better? What was I going to say at that point? Coach, you're delusional. We're still friends because, I never identified or shared the, but I can tell you, because he's open to it, the very first coach to really call and make a thing of it was back to 90. It was Scott Drew. Right? And all he did was win the national championship. But when he was building Baylor, they were on the bubble that year. I think it was 98 or 99, somewhere around that. No, I'm sorry, 08. 08. Yeah, he wasn't there in 98. 08. And, they did eventually get in as an 11 and begin their build toward, what happened this past season. And he just, nice as hell, called and called and called and called. And so I jokingly told him that I was going to start giving out privately the annual Scott Drew Award to the coach who, kind of got up my what the most during the run-up period to the tournament. And he's a repeat winner, but not last year. Like when you're number one
seed, he was secure last year.
Yeah, you don't need to talk to Lunardi too much.
Yeah.
But I made a lot of great friends that way. Let's just leave it at that. And finally, the couple years that Bryce Drew was with us at ESPN, he's like, did my brother really? And I was like, oh my God, Bryce. Like he would give an aspirin a headache. Like he was nice about it. And some guys aren't as nice.
Yeah. And
we've seen that, play itself out on TV from time to time. Again, don't need to, mention any one like Archie Miller by name, but I certainly can. He knows what I think now, so I don't have anything to lose. But yeah, and what that drives home to me is just how important it is to these guys, and how important it is for me to never half-ass it.
Well,
right?
They probably see the importance because, do they think that, and do you think that you have an influence on the committee at all? And then, in some coaches' minds, maybe their jobs are on the line based on, has it gotten to that level to where what you're saying, what you're coming up with is that, monumental in these coaches and these teams' lives?
Well, let me get, great friend and colleague, Seth Greenberg at the network. If he was on this call, he would say, in my early years with him in Bristol, he'd be like, you kept us out, in year A, B, and C. I'm like, well, I'm not the one who played Western Carolina 17 times or whatever. Well, we beat Duke. I'm like, okay. But I think he finally knows now, and he says it in the book, that he, I now know that committee members pay attention to me during the season. I didn't used to believe that until some of them told me. But when they close the door in the room and have their voting screen in front of them, not a thing. If anything, maybe go the other way, right? Because who among us likes the guy in the back of the room with the answers to the test who won't share them, right? Nobody likes that guy, right? Nobody likes that guy. And that's why I try and be as open and as transparent with every request, from the Topeka Eagle to, 5 minutes on Scott Van Pelt.
Yeah, it's big. It's become a obviously, as JR showed the website now, you've got a bracket out now. You've had one for a couple of weeks, I guess, and the season hasn't even
that
started
guy must
yet.
Be an idiot. That guy must be an idiot. Now, there is an off-season kind of algorithm, if you will, that I've put in place, kind of measure returning minutes, the offensive and defensive efficiency of those minutes, how we think that the minutes will be replaced and at what level. But the great thing is, in another, 3 or 4 weeks, then we can watch games. And then it's more than a formula, right? And it's important that the off-season stuff exists now because people want it. But I make no claims to it being as rigorous, right? Because it can't be. It's like the baseball hot stove league. Like we talk around the water cooler. I think Michigan's going to be great next year. No, I think it's UCLA. Okay, fine. Now, we could come back and look at this, what's on your screen in March, and it's not going to be terrible. Like history would suggest that it's going to have, because I might monitor this in 10 or 12 years, I get on average between 2 or 3 of the 1 seeds correct a year in advance, or 6 months in advance, whenever it posts, and probably about 45 to 50 teams. Right, because the one bid leagues can go any number of directions. The best player at Coastal Carolina could tear up his knee, on October 15th, God forbid. Right? I mean, now come Selection Sunday, it's going to be a whole lot closer than that. I mean, it better be, or I'm just wasting my time.
Well, and one of those schools, and I've got to bring up Syracuse here. You mentioned Matt Martucci. He and I are both Syracuse alums. You work with him on the St. Joe's broadcast.
Did he
What is
even
it with
graduate, Mike?
What's
Did
that?
Did he even graduate?
Well, I don't know. He's a little bit younger than me, so I cannot confirm that.
All
or
right,
deny it. But they seem to be the one school that, and the
Yeah.
fan base, I know that's a fan base. You mentioned the Kentucky fan base, but I know that's a fan base that you hear from as well. And maybe opponents' fan bases as well, because,
Yeah.
how are they getting in some of these years?
Look, next year there'll be 358 Division I schools.
Yeah.
I will claim, with not trying to, no false modesty, because people who know I'm neither false nor modest. All right. I will claim to be an expert, maybe even the best expert, on the postseason prospects for 357 of the 358. I can't get Syracuse right. It's like kryptonite. Like, I can't do it. And it's not like a one-off. Like, it's 3 out of every 4 years. Like, my off-season algorithm is almost purely numeric, because there's no subjective observation that has occurred on games that didn't exist. Right? It's just the only way I can be fair is to make it purely quantitative. And how is it that 3 years out of the last 5 in August, when you run the numbers for 358 teams, Syracuse lands between 67 and 69? How is that possible? Right? You could flip a coin 200 times and have it come up heads. That's impossible. A statistician, and I don't claim to be that, they would tell, that's not possible. But here we are, and I don't know why. And I think Coach Boeheim is just sitting in a little room up there laughing at me. In fact, he's kind of admitted as much. And I got nothing. I just can't explain it. And again, I think they're going to be pretty good, actually. But I would just caution, the Cuse faithful. We have many, 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 many examples over the years of teams that looked really good for 2 or 3 weeks in March, and then were over-evaluated the following year. It almost never goes the other way. 3 months of performance is more indicative than 3 weeks of performance. Right? A statistician would talk about sample size and standard deviations, all that stuff. What I'm saying is, it may not be what you saw in the Sweet 16. Or maybe Buddy Boeheim will continue to make every shot he takes. Maybe he will. And maybe when I hang up with you, Scarlett Johansson will be on the phone. Right? But I'm guessing not.
Well, that would certainly be an upgrade from me, for sure. How much time, are you traveling? Obviously, you're doing St. Joe's broadcast, so you're traveling with them, but are you traveling and are you seeing teams play throughout the year in person, or is it more, what you're seeing, watching games on TV?
Well, last year, obviously, we were all
Yeah.
watching from afar, and that had its pluses and minuses. The chief plus being, if I had to do a midnight sports center, it was a pretty short commute to bed. Like, hey, Joe, thanks for staying up, I'd get in my ear, right? And be like, hey, not a lot of traffic walking down the hallway. But yeah, I do look forward to being able to go to games, and I do have, through ESPN and every internet subscription, like there's not a game that I can't get if I really want to watch it. But I'm tracking games later in the year more than actually watching them, because there's too many to, because the biggest way this has changed is I'm now expected to have kind of instant updates, which I think requires a different evaluation method from the other bracketologists, and for that matter, the committee members, because they're doing snapshot brackets in the committee's case, in February, and then the real one, and then the February top 16, and then the real one. And in most other cases on the internet, the other guys who do it, and they're all great, most of them anyway, they're doing their snapshots once a week. Like, I have to say at halftime, if Mississippi State loses, here's what happens, right? And that requires a different, approach, if you will. So I'm tracking games at that point and doing a lot of if this, if that. Like the guy for the in-between show on Super Tuesday might say, all right, Joe, what do we talk about with, Jay, Will, and LaFonso if blah, blah, blah happens? Right. So I'll just again, 80% of the work is off the air. I'm just setting the narrative. Like if I never appeared on television, I think they would still need me. In fact, it might actually be better for them if I was never on television. But I know a lot of fans in Kentucky and Syracuse feel that way. But I do enjoy that part of it too. It's just fun.
Well, tell us about the book. I'm sure some of the topics that we touched on here, but what can people expect if they want to buy that book? As you see there, Bracketology, and what can you tell us about it?
Well, this is the first official book promotion mention for the 21-22 season. It came out last March, in the pandemic. So we're kind of hoping to kickstart it again. And what it is what you've heard for the last hour. It's a little bit of my story in basketball, but it's mostly about the evolution of college basketball in the bracketology era. And, it's got a lot of humorous, at least I think they're humorous, anecdotes. And if you watch this conversation, yours and mine, and you said, hey, I'd like to sit and have a beer with that guy and pick his brain, right? That's what the book is. And because my brain is somewhat limited, it's not 6 beers, it's just 1 or 2. And I've been told that, like, here's what I'll say. It's better than I thought it would be. Like, I didn't really want to do it because I didn't think anyone would buy a book about me. And I was convinced by my co-author, David Smale, that it would really be a college basketball book, you just kind of using my career path to expose a side of the game that wouldn't have been seen. And I think it does that really very, what am I supposed to say? It sucks. I read a lot of sports books. And I spend a lot of money on other people's sports books. If you were to get this for yourself as a fan or as a Christmas gift for someone, they would not be disappointed. And it's not like 73 charts of this selection grid or that. It's none of that. It's just conversational. And quite a few coaches opining on what they think of bracketology and what they think of little old Joey there. Some of them even like me.
And to clarify, it does not come with beer. You've got to provide your own beer, correct?
You've got to provide your own beer. But I do talk about the Yingling vending machine that's now in my garage, which was a nice byproduct once of being the bracketologist.
There you go. So, Yingling, it's a Pennsylvania product there. Finally, I want to wrap up with your bobblehead. That's something else that's out right now.
Oh, I don't have one here.
You don't have one here? I think JR maybe has a picture of one. There we go.
Oh, my God. Look at that. Well, first of all, people know that's actual size. And, man, that is frightening.
Did you not?
I don't even know what. I don't even know what to say other than that. There have been no royalties yet. It's not like we've, past Cabbage Patch Kids here in the sales department. But I do hope to donate any royalties to Coaches versus Cancer as we go along. So that's a plus. And yeah, my hands aren't that big. I cannot palm the ball. That's what I'll say. The rest, big nose, big teeth, big ears. I'd say that's pretty on target.
So you've made it when you have your own bobblehead doll.
That's correct. That's correct. And I heard from Sister Jean that she wants one. So,
wow.
That's pretty cool.
That's some basketball royalty right there.
I have another friend who told me he has 4 bobbleheads. He's a golf buddy. The Pope, Tiger Woods, Kate Upton. I'm not sure what bobbles, but Kate Upton and me. And I think to myself, one of these is not like the others. Right? Mike, this is the wrong thing to do, but I got to go.
Okay, we're going to let you go.
I don't want to ruin your show.
Before you go, how can people follow you?
Oh, just on Twitter at ESPN Lunardi. And the book is at triumphbooks.com or amazon.com. Or just, if you want to Google Joe Lunardi Bobble, God only knows what will come up. The last time I did it was me, Joe Biden, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I don't know, like Patrick Mahomes or something.
Well, Joe Lunardi, we appreciate your time. I know you're about to get really busy here, and I know the Kentucky and Syracuse fan bases will be certainly tuning into you throughout the year. Thanks for your time today.
Well, and go Seahawks.
There you go. UNCW as well. Maybe we'll see them on the bracket this year as well. It's been a little while.
If you come to Drexel, look us up.
We will. All right, Joe. Take care. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Well, again, my thanks to Joe Lunardi joining us today. Special thanks to Matt Martucci, his broadcast partner on the St. Joe's basketball games, who helped get us connected and get that interview for you, talking about bracketology. Again, March Madness is closer than you might think. So be sure to follow him, get that book, get that bobblehead as well. Awesome, fun stuff there. Again, thanks for watching us here today. JR Quitman behind the scenes as well. We hope to see you next time for another edition of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night, everybody.